You can order the lower control arms used in the video on the CarParts.com website via the link in the description. Turn your engine off. Set the parking brake. Pull on the bonnet release handle, open the bonnet. Before lifting your vehicle, it is necessary to measure the distance between the center of your wheel and the wheel arc. This will allow you to achieve an optimal tightening of the silent block equipped elements in their initial position. Loosen the stud bolts on the front wheels. Lift the front of your vehicle. Place the vehicle on the axle stands. We strongly suggest watching our video on how to jack your Ford F-150 safely before carrying out this step. To be able to replace the lower control arms on your vehicle, you need to remove the wheels to gain complete access to the suspension system. Don't forget to put the wheels under the vehicle. You can now see your car's lower control arm. Start by unclipping the ABS sensor cable connection from the mudguard. Unclip the two cable attachment points using a fork. Then disconnect it from the brake hose. Finally, using an 8mm spanner, unscrew the screw that holds it into the wheel knuckle. Using a ratchet and a 10mm socket, unscrew the brake hose clamp from the wheel knuckle. Using a flathead screwdriver, remove the nut cover from the hub. Then, locking the hub rotation with the crowbar, unscrew the hub nut using a ratchet and a 15mm socket. Turn the disc inward to make this operation easier. It is now necessary to remove the caliper assembly. Start by attaching an iron thread to the vehicle body to hold it together when it is removed. Then, using a ratchet and a 21mm socket, unscrew the two screws from the caliper mount. For more information, we recommend watching our video, How to Replace the Front Discs and Pads Ford F-150. Then attach it to the previously installed iron thread. Hey, it's Alex from CarParts.com. If you enjoyed this video and want to support us, like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, back to work. Disconnect the sway bar end link from the lower control arm. To do so, we recommend watching our video, How to Replace the Sway Bar End Links Ford F-150. Using a ratchet and a 22mm socket, loosen the upper control arm ball joint nut and unscrew it a few threads. Tap on the knuckle to release the ball joint. Using a socket wrench and a 21mm socket, unscrew the lock nut on the outer tie rod and remove some of the holding nuts. To do so, we recommend watching our video, How to Replace the Outer Tie Rod Ford F-150. Complete the removal of the upper control arm ball joint nut. Disconnect the vacuum lines from the hub lock actuator. Then remove the ABS sensor cable. Unlock the lower control arm ball joint nut using a ratchet and a 24mm socket, and unscrew the nut a few threads. Tip: to avoid everything rotating when unscrewing, reinsert the outer tie rod into its knuckle. If you want to know which tools and parts we use in this video, just check the description and you'll find everything you need. Remove the outer tie rod. You can now disconnect the upper control arm from the wheel knuckle so that you can remove the drive shaft from the hub. Using a forked ball joint puller, remove the ball joint from the wheel knuckle. Then lever the control arm ball joint completely out of its knuckle. Then, while maintaining the wheel knuckle, finish unscrewing by hand. Extract the wheel knuckle. Attach the drive shaft to one of the strut spring coils to gain access to the strut foot screw. Then, using a breaker bar, a 30mm socket, a ratchet, and a 27mm socket, unscrew the strut foot nut without extracting the screw. You now have access to the 2 silent block screws of the lower control arm. Brush the 2 nuts of the lower control arm silent block retaining bolts and spray them with penetrating oil. Using a 27mm spanner, lock the nut on the rear silent block retaining bolt and unlock the bolt using a socket wrench and a 21mm socket. Using the same tools, repeat the operation on the front silent block screw. Then remove the screws. Extract the screw from the foot of the strut. You can now remove the lower control arm by pulling it towards you and moving it back and forth. Brush and grease the control arm area to facilitate its installation. You can order the lower control arm used in the video on the CarParts.com website via the link in the description. Unscrew the ball joint retaining screw. Take the control arm. Grease the location of the strut foot and its silent block. You can purchase the parts we used here by visiting our website at CarParts.com. Then install the control arm. Replace the screws on the cradle side. It is then necessary to insert the strut foot into the control arm. To do this, we advise you to use a jack to apply pressure to the control arm. Then insert the screws back in. You can use a hammer to help you. Screw the nut back on until it makes contact. Roughly refit the nuts of the control arm silent blocks. Using a wire brush, scrub the knuckle of the wheel knuckle. Then apply silicone grease to the flat part that will be in contact with the lower control arm ball joint sleeve. Detach the drive shaft. Take the wheel knuckle and, while inserting the control arm ball into its knuckle, thread the drive shaft into the hub. Secure the hole by screwing the nut on the ball joint a few threads by hand. Once in place, tighten the nut to the point of contact using a 24mm spanner, ratchet, and 12mm socket to lock the rotation of the ball joint. Using a wire brush, scrub the knuckle of the wheel knuckle. Then apply silicone grease to the flat part that will be in contact with the upper control arm ball joint sleeve. Do not grease the inside of the cone. Then insert the upper control arm into the wheel knuckle. Then screw the nut back on by hand a few threads. Insert the drive shaft into the hub properly. Using a wire brush, scrub the knuckle of the wheel knuckle. Then apply silicone grease to the flat part that will be in contact with the sleeve of the outer tie rod. Put the outer tie rod back in place. Then screw it back on. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. You can now complete the tightening of the upper control arm ball joint. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. You can now complete the tightening of the lower control arm ball joint with a torque wrench. It is necessary to tighten the front retaining bolts in the vehicle on the ground position. Lift the wheel knuckle unit with the jack until the original measurement between the center of the wheel and the wheel arc is reached. Complete then the tightening of the silent block's holding screws. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. Do the same with the strut foot screw. Remove the jack. You can now put the sway bar end link back in place and screw it back in. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. Reinstall the brake disc. You can now reinstall the caliper assembly. And screw it back on. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. Reconnect the vacuum lines. Screw the brake hose mounting bracket back on. Don't forget to remove the cable that you used to hold the caliper assembly together. Replace the ABS sensor cable and clip it back into its slots. Then reconnect it. Replace the hub nut. Then, while blocking the rotation of the hub with a crowbar, screw it back on. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. Put the cover back on the nut. Then, you will be able to put the wheels back on your vehicle. Put the car on the ground and block the wheels properly. Operation completed.